Hi everyone, this is Vicki, and I'm going to do a quick recording, I think it's going to be quick, of Lesson 1 in Adobe Photoshop CC 2020, Classroom in a Book, Getting to Know the Work Area, so that if you are not able to join me on the Zoom session, you'll have something to work with. So right here I have Photoshop open, and it's showing me what's new. These are some of the things that are new in 2020, so you could flip through these and check them out, and then you can go ahead and close that little window. It'll probably open up again a couple times, but anyway, you'll get to the main Photoshop screen. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how to open image files in Adobe Photoshop. We're going to learn how to select and use tools in the tool panel, select some options for a tool using the options bar. We're going to use various methods to zoom in and out of an image. We're going to select, rearrange, and use panels. We're going to choose commands in the panel and context menus, open and use a panel in the panel dock, and then undo some actions to correct mistakes or make some different choices. You should allow at least an hour to complete this. And if you haven't already downloaded the lesson files, you're going to need to go to adobepress.com and register your book and then download the lesson files that are in the extra, I think it's in the extras area, but you'll find out more in the accessing the lesson files and web edition in the getting started section at the very beginning of your book. Okay, on this, this first project is a birthday card design. And when you first open Adobe Photoshop, you'll see that the work area includes menus, toolbars, and panels that are going to give you quick access to a variety of tools and options for editing and adding elements to your image. In Photoshop, we primarily work with bitmapped digital images. These are continuous tone images that have been converted into a series of small squares or picture elements called pixels. We can also work with vector graphics in Photoshop, which are drawings that are made of smooth lines that will retain their crispness when they're scaled up or down. You can create original artwork in Photoshop, or you can import images from many sources, like your mobile phone, a digital camera, stock photography, scans, and then artwork that you've created in other programs. So one of the things that the book suggests that you do is to reset the default preferences. I am not going to do that, and I'm going to leave it up to you whether or not you want to do that. If you're brand new at Adobe Photoshop, you might want to, although it'll probably already be the default preferences because you've never worked with it. And the reason Adobe has you do this is so that your screen will look like the book or your ebook screen every time you start a new lesson. So go ahead and follow that if you like. And I'm going to show you a couple of tips for just resetting your workspace that will help you if you end up closing Photoshop and the next time you open it up, it looks completely different and you're a little bit confused. I'll show you how to reset your workspace. So we're going to, you see the home screen right here. And if you want to go straight to Photoshop, you just click that Photoshop icon in the upper left. I'm going to skip a couple pages, and then I'm going to open a new file. So I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to click Open. And when I do that, I get a pop-up panel. I'm working on a Mac, by the way. It might look a little bit different on your PC. but it asks me if I want to open a cloud document, or it shows me all my files in my computer. And where I have stored, let's see, I have the lessons in my download. So I'm going to go and make sure this is the right one. You know what? Let me go to a different spot. Sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to figure out where. Let me make sure I have the right. I'm going to pause just so I can figure out. Okay, so I just created a folder and put it into, oops. Anyway, I'll clean it up later. But I'll navigate to lesson 1, and I want to open both these files. So I'm just going to go ahead and do both right now. I'm doing this a little bit different from your book, but when I open them in Photoshop, you'll see that there's two files, two tabs, two files. One is the end. This is what the file, or what we're going to create, what it's going to look like. And then we have our start file, which is what we're going to begin with. Okay, and all these different areas are as follows. Up at the very top, you have what is called the menu bar. And then the next one down is, so the menu bar's up here. Then you have your option bar right here, and this option bar changes depending on what tool you have selected. If you want to exit to your home screen, you click this home icon. The tools panel is here on the left. If you want to search within the app, it's over here, little magnifying glass. And then here you have your Workspaces menu. And here, if you want to share an image, you have a button here. And then right in the middle, this whole thing is called the panel. There's one main difference between the Photoshop work area on Windows and that on the Mac. And Windows will always present Photoshop in a contained window. So on the Mac, you can choose whether you want to work with an application frame, which contains the Photoshop document windows and panels within a frame that is distinct from other applications you may have open, and only the menu bars outside the application frame. The application frame is enabled by default, so if you want to disable this, you would go to Window, which is up here, and go to Application Frame, just down here, and uncheck it. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that checked because I am used to working this way. So please note that when you open multiple documents in Photoshop, they're all going to open with their own tab. They're going to open separate from one another. We're going to go ahead and close the end file because we took a look at it. You can also leave it open if you like, but if you want to compare, but we'll just go ahead and close it because the book's doing that. So the first thing we're going to use is a tool from over here on the left, and we're going to use the zoom tool. It appears, you have a zoom tool in many other Adobe applications, including Illustrator and InDesign. And so with the O1 start file open, we will we see a background image, and we also see a ribbon graphic, but we can't see the ribbon graphic right now on our screen because the visibility icon is turned off. So if I click that area, you'll see an eye icon and it becomes visible, but I'm going to leave it as it was when we opened it, and the only thing I see is the rose image. You can do a lot of customization of your tools panel if you like. I like to have it long and narrow like this because it takes up less space, but you can read in your book on how you can change it to a two-column tool panel, or you can do some other modifications, but I'm just going to leave that. I want to point out that down here there is a percentage, and that is showing us what the current image is opening at, 100%. So it's opening at its full size. If I hover over the tools panel and the magnifying glass, I get a little tooltip that pops up, and that not only identifies what the tool I'm hovering over, but it shows me a keyboard shortcut. Some people are really good at keyboard shortcuts. If you are one of those people, you'll want to take note that you can access the zoom tool by pressing the Z key. But I'm going to go ahead and click on it to select it. And then I'm going to move the pointer over the image window. And now it looks like a tiny magnifying glass with a plus sign. The image will enlarge to a preset percentage level, which will replace the previous value in the status bar. So every time I click, it's going up 100%. And if I keep clicking, it'll keep going up that percentage all the way to a maximum of 12,800%. If I hold down the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on a Mac, you'll see that that plus sign becomes a minus sign, and then when I click, I can reduce it by the same amount. So there are other methods to zoom in and out. So you can use your option bar to zoom in and out, or you can type a new percentage up here in the option bar and then press enter or return. You can fit it to the screen, you can fill the screen. If scrubby zoom is selected in the option bar, you can click anywhere in the image and drag to the right to zoom in, and drag to the left, to zoom out. And then I can fit it back on screen, or I can fill the screen, or I can just go for 100%. So I'm going to deselect the scrubby zoom because I don't use that very often. And then I'm going to use my zoom tool to draw a rectangle to enclose part of the rose blossom. And now the area that I chose with that rectangle fills the entire image window, and I've zoomed into that amount, whatever it took to fill the image window. And then I'll go back to fit screen to fit it back into the to fit the entire image back in again. So now we've used the zoom tool in 4 different ways. We've clicked, we've held down a keyboard modifier while clicking, we've dragged to zoom in and out, and we have dragged to define a magnification area. So many of the other tools over here in the Tools panel can be used with keyboard combinations and options as well. Don't worry if you can't remember everything. A lot of times there's so many options that you'll have to there are certain things you'll do time and time again, and you'll begin to pick up and start to use some of these either keyboard shortcuts or modifiers. Okay, the navigator panel is another way that you can make large changes in the zoom level. And I'm not going to demonstrate that. It's in a special area on your book, but you can go ahead and do that if you like. So now let's get to editing this photo. And one of the most common edits that you'll do in Photoshop is to brighten an image that you've taken with your digital camera or your phone. And you can brighten it by a couple different ways, but we're going to do it by changing the brightness and contrast values. So over here we have the layers panel, and we see that we have 2 layers in this particular document. We want to make sure that we're working on the rose layer. And you see if I click on the ribbons layer, it's highlighted, and now that's the active layer. I want to make sure that the rose layer is highlighted. And now in the adjustments panel, which is above the layers panel, actually it's not in mine, so I'm just going to show you where it is over here on the side. Actually, maybe I do have it here. Okay, I don't. So mine's might look a little bit different. Let me go ahead and reset. Remember I told you how I'm going to reset the essentials. There we go. So this might look a little bit more like yours. So here we go. Now we have the adjustments panel up here. So in the adjustments panel, I'm going to click the brightness and contrast icon. Again, if you hover over these, you'll get a little tip that tells you what these icons mean. So the very first one here is the brightness and contrast. And when I open that, or when I click on it, a new panel opens, which is the properties panel, and it will display all the brightness and contrast settings. Now I'm going to move this slider under brightness all the way up. Now the book tells you a specific amount, 98%. Most of the time when you're doing this kind of work, you're just going to be watching your image and you're going to stop when it looks good to you. So we're also going to increase the contrast, and again we're just going to keep going up. You would stop when it looks good. We're going to go by the book values so we stay consistent. So we're going to move it up to 18. And the image of the rose is immediately brightened. When you're working, don't be afraid to experiment with all these sliders so that you start to get an understanding of what you're doing, not just following a recipe. Because remember that every Photoshop is going to be different. So now we can close this properties panel, and we can click on the visibility icon for the brightness and contrast adjustment layer to hide it, and then we can click it again to show it. Now I would rather have this layer be right above the layer that I was working on. So it should have popped up right above the rose layer, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on it and drag it so that it is there. Otherwise it will affect my ribbons layer, and you'll understand a little bit more of that later, but I don't want to apply these same brightness and contrast changes to my ribbons layer. So with an adjustment layer like this, you can always disable it just by hiding the effect, or you can edit it. So if you needed to readjust this these levels here, you could just double click on that icon and be able to go back and you know, change these sliders around a little bit more. So these layers are one of the most fundamental parts of Photoshop and one of the most powerful features. There are lots of different types of layers. So we've just worked with an adjustment layer. We can have image layers like the rows. We can have text layers like a little bit of what you have here on the ribbons. And you can have solid colors and others that just interact with layers below them. So in lesson 4, you'll take a deep dive into layers and learn a lot more about that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and save this file now since we've done some work on it. And we're going to change the name when we do that. So by changing the name, by choosing Save As, we'll preserve that original file as it was, and we'll save all of the work that we're doing as a new Photoshop file. And that way, if we ever needed to go back and work on the original, it would be there unchanged. So I'm going to go ahead and save this 01 working, and I'm going to save it as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file and will include all of my layers. And then I like to save these in the lesson folders, so luckily that popped up. Otherwise I would have to navigate to it, but I'm going to go ahead and save it in lesson 1. And I'm actually going to add the words demo to it for this recording. And then I'll click save, and I'll just go ahead and click through the OK on the Photoshop format options. And my file stays open, and then I can just keep working. So Photoshop uses a foreground color and a background color whenever you paint on a layer. And most of the time, we're going to pay a lot of attention to the foreground color, which is the color that's loaded onto a brush. By default, the foreground color is black and the background color is white. You can change the foreground and the background colors in several ways. One of the ways is to use the eyedropper tool to sample a color right from the image that you're working on. So we're going to use the eyedropper tool to sample the blue of one ribbon so that we can match that color when we create another ribbon. First, we need to display the ribbon's layer so that we can see the color that we want to sample. So I'll click that visibility icon, and the ribbon layer will become visible. We see that there's a ribbon with Happy Birthday written on it, and we want to select that ribbon layer so that it becomes the active layer. Now we'll go ahead and find the eyedropper tool over here in the Tools panel, and we're just going to click the blue area inside the Happy Birthday ribbon to sample a blue color. And you'll see that down here, this little foreground square has changed to that blue color. And also you'll see up here in the color panel that the foreground color has changed to blue. If you ever have trouble finding a tool, just click that search icon up in the top right corner of the workspace and type in the name of the tool. Now we're going to learn a little bit more about setting some tool properties using some of these menus and option bars that we have open. You can change the unit of measure that you use when you work in Photoshop, and we know that this greeting card is going to be printed, so we know that we want to work in inches. We'll go up to the Edit menu and we'll choose Preferences. This is if you're on Windows, If you're here on a Mac, you're going to go up to the Photoshop menu and then choose Preferences, and then we're going to go down to Units and Rulers. Sorry if you guys can hear all this noise that is going on in the background. I have no idea what's happening. It sounds like some tree trimming going on. And then in the Units menu that pops up, under Rulers, we want to choose inches. And you'll see that there's a number of different things that you can choose there, but we'll choose inches and then we'll click OK. Context menus contain commands and options that are specific to or appropriate to specific elements in the work area. And they're sometimes called right-click or shortcut menus. Usually the commands on a context menu are also available in the menu bar or in panel menus, but using the context menu is more immediate and can save time. So you want to change the view as needed. You can either scroll or you can zoom so that you can clearly see the lower third of the card. And then we will choose the rectangular marquee tool up here in the Tools panel. This tool selects rectangular areas. We'll learn a little bit more about selection tools in Lesson 3, but we're going to go ahead and use this right now. So we're going to drag this tool to create a selection about 3/4 of an inch tall and 2.5 inches wide, ending at the right edge of the card. So as we drag the tool, Photoshop will display the width and the height of the selected area. And it's okay if the size is a little bit different from the book. So I'm going to start at the edge here, and I want to drag out, and you can see the width and the height changing. So I want the width to be about 3/4 of an inch, which is 0.75. And then I want it to be about 2.5 inches. Oops, I'm sorry, got that backwards. I want it to be 2.5 inches wide, so I'm going to keep going out this way. Okay. And don't worry, if you can't get it exact, you can always adjust it. And that's a little bit too wide, or too high. So 0.75, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and let go of my mouse. So now I see a selection border that's indicated by a dashed line. It's called a selection marquee. Sometimes they call them marching ants, which is because they're animated. And then I'll select my brush tool over here in the Tools panel. And then in the image window, somewhere within the image window, I either want to right-click if I'm using Windows or Control-click on a Mac, and just do that anywhere. It's not giving me, there we go. Make sure you're within the image window. I was outside. So you'll get this brush tool context menu. Now, you may not have so many brushes. Over the years, I've purchased a lot of brush sets, and as you can see, I have quite a few here, but don't worry if yours doesn't look quite like this. You're going to have these first few. And what we're looking for is the very first brush, which is a soft round. So make sure you have that selected. And then for size, we want it to be 65 pixels. You can either drag this up to 65, or you can just type in 65 in that little window. So sometimes it is easier to just type in the number, and then that will set the brush to the right size. And you'll see that for a soft round brush, the hardness is set to 0. Don't change that at all. And then you can just press enter or return to close that context menu. Now we're just going to drag the brush across the selected area, and we'll see that it's not painting outside that selection marquee. So that's awesome. We can just go ahead and drag and fill this all in with blue. You'll find later there's different ways to do this, but go ahead and fill that totally with the blue color. And then once you have it all filled in, just go ahead and go up to your select menu and deselect so that the marching ants goes away, and the only thing that's left is that blue bar that remains now on your ribbons layer. So over here in the tools panel, you'll see that some of these tools have a little downward facing arrow next to them. And that indicates that there are other tools that are related to the tool on top that are hidden behind that tool. This is to save space. If you had every single thing, every single tool option in Photoshop on this panel, it would take up half your screen. So if you're looking for a tool, you may want to just go through these, one at a time and see what's hidden underneath. And what I'm looking for right now is the polygonal lasso tool, which is hidden under the regular lasso tool. And I want to use this to take out a little triangular notch from the color bar so that it looks a little bit more like a ribbon. With the polygonal lasso tool selected, I'm going to draw freehand selection. And this tool allows me to draw straight edge sections of a selection border really easily. Well, again, we'll do a lot more with selection tools in lesson 3. But I'm going to move this pointer over to the left edge of the blue color bar that I just painted. I'm going to click just to the left of the upper left corner. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this. And go back to that tool. So I'm going to click just outside and to the left to set my start point. And then I'm going to move it to the right and click about halfway between the top and the bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and click just outside to make the second side of the triangle. And then I want to go back to my original start, and you'll notice, if you can see, a little circle appears on the lower left of my tool icon, and that indicates that I'm about to close that path. And I get another little selection marquee, and then if I press the delete key on my keyboard, I have created a notch for my ribbon. I will go ahead and go to the select menu and deselect that area again, and my ribbon is ready for me to add a name, some text. So now I'm going to use the option bar to select some text properties and then type the name here. Back over in the tools panel, I want to choose the horizontal type tool. And now when I choose that, all of these options up here are related to the type tool. In the option bar, just go ahead and choose a font that you like. You can see all of your fonts when you press that downward facing arrow, and you can see a little sample over to the side. I'm going to go ahead and use, I'll scroll down and use Minion Pro. Again, I may have more than you have, especially if you're new to Photoshop, but don't worry, you'll soon have a ton of your own. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, let's see, Minion Pro. and I'm going to choose italic. And I want to type in 32 points. You can either type in the number or you can choose from some presets here. They don't have all the presets of font size, so you know, you may have to just type it in. There's a lot of noise outside. And then if I don't have my swatches panel forward, I'll go ahead and click on that tab to bring it forward. And I want to change the color of this. So let's go to a pastel yellow. And as you move your pointer over, you'll see that the name of the color pops up. And the color will appear in two places. It now appears as the foreground color over here in the Tools panel, and it also appears as the text color swatch in this option bar. There's lots of other ways to choose colors, which you'll learn later, but this is using the swatches is great, especially if you start to work with select swatches of colors that you create. Then you can always just go to your swatches panel and stay consistent. Okay, I'm going to click the horizontal type tool once anywhere on the left side of this colored bar that we made. And when we do that, some filler text, some placeholder text appears, and it's a sample of the size, the current type specifications that we put up there. And it's already selected by default, so we can immediately start typing over it. And you can type any name you like. I think I'll just type Becky because my sister Becky's birthday was just the other day. So as you type, it replaces the placeholder text, but you don't have to worry about positioning it right away. We can do that later. And now you can commit your type by clicking on the check icon, and that will commit your text. One of the things you'll see is that a new layer is created that is already named after the text that you entered, and that text is on its own layer. Well, this color looks okay. What we really want is to match this. Oops, we want to match this color. I'm going to go ahead and go back up here and fit this on screen. We want to match this color and these effects that are up here in the happy birthday. So I'm going to go back to my swatches panel, and instead of seeing all of these colors, I want to see a small list of colors and just choose it by name. And then I'll scroll about halfway down. I'm looking for light yellow. There's that pastel yellow that we've chosen. I'm going to keep going till I get to the light yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and select that. And I forgot to select the text, so let me make sure my text tool is selected, and I'm going to double click on that to select it, and then I'm going to make sure my color is set to light yellow, and then I'll commit it to that change. And now I've created a new color. So in a perfect world, we would never make a mistake. We'd never click something, the wrong object. We'd always correctly anticipate how specific actions would bring our design ideas to life. We'd never have to track in a perfect world. But in the real world, Photoshop does give us the power to step back and undo some actions so that we can try other options. So we could go up to our edit menu. This is one way, and we can undo edit type layer, or you can press Control or Command Z to undo your last option. The name now returns to the previous color, which is pastel yellow. And then we can redo it if we like, or use the keyboard shortcut Control Shift Z if you're on Windows, or Command Shift Z if you're on a Mac, to reapply that orange color to the text. Oh, and let me go back because, oh, but we don't want that color anyway. Well, you'll see as you work through this. I picked the wrong color. I picked light yellow, but I should have picked light yellow orange. It would have stood out a little more. Okay, every time you use the undo command, it reverses one more step. So if you want to undo 5 steps, you can do undo 5 times, and redo works the same way. Okay, and once the color is back to the color that you'd like to use, we're just going to use the Move tool over here in the toolbar to drag the name so that it is centered in the blue bar. And we should see, it's really helpful, you'll see once it's centered in here. Oops, a lot of times you'll see these smart guides pop up. I'm just going to eyeball it. And actually, they don't have it centered, they have it a little bit over here, so I'll do that. There we go. And then we want to save all this work we've done. So I'll just hit save this time because I've already changed the name. And if I want to get rid of that marquee around there, just click any other tool. We'll talk a little bit about panels now. You don't really ever have to use all of your panels simultaneously. So they are in panel groups, and there's a lot of default configurations that leave most of the panels unopened so that you have more image area here and you can actually see what you're working on instead of all the tools and options that you have. If you ever want to know what panels you have available to you, you can see the entire list in the window menu. And check marks appear next to the names of the panels that are open and active in their panel groups. You can open a closed panel, or you can close an open panel by selecting the panel name. So right now I have layers open. If I clicked that, it would uncheck it and the layers panel would close. If I'm wondering what happened to my layers panel, I can go back up to the window menu, click on the layers panel, and it will reopen. When panels are hidden, a thin vertical line strip is visible at the left or right edges of the application frame. If you hover your pointer over the strip, you can temporarily reveal the panels that are docked along that edge. You can hide all the panels at once, including the option bar and the tools panel, by pressing the Tab key. I can't tell you how many times this has happened to students. They'll be working along in Photoshop and then everything has disappeared. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. Try pressing the Tab key and you'll be amazed at everything reopening. So we've already used a couple of panels over here in the panel dock when we have worked with the layers panel here, and then we use the swatches panel up here. You can drag panels to or from this dock And this is convenient. If you start working with Photoshop a lot, you may want to configure your own workspace and determine for yourself which panels are open and which panels are grouped with other panels. And I've done that quite a bit working with Deke McClelland, who is a Photoshop expert. He does a class called One-on-One Fundamentals. It's available on lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning. And one of the things that he does in one of his early videos is take you through creating a workspace that he feels works very well for photo editing. But most of the time, we're going to be working in this Essentials menu. So if you want to move these panels around, you can drag the title bar around. So I could drag this adjustments layer out and have it just be out here on its own. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to put it back in here to this panel group. You can add other panels. You can resize panels to use screen space more efficiently. So if you want to collapse all the open icons or open panels to icons, just click the double arrow up here and everything will collapse down. And if you want to expand all these, just click those double arrows. And you can do it one at a time. You can do different groups. If you want to change the size. So one of the things that you'll find is as you're working with a few more layers, that you may want this layers panel so that you don't have to scroll. You may want to, let's see, I'm going to go back here to tiny thumbnail. Oh, actually, I'll go to small thumbnail. Anyway, you can, let's see, you can kind of adjust these so that you can see, more of the layers without having to scroll, and you can compress all these other, we really don't have to have that quite so big. We don't have to have this quite so big. And now we can see all of our layers down here on this panel. If you want to collapse a panel group so that only the dock header bar and the tabs are visible, just double click on the title bar and it'll disappear, and you can see that it's right down here, and then you can double click it to open it back up again. And then the tools panel over here, if you want to see it two columns, you can just click on the double arrows, and if you like the one column, you can just click again. You can drag this to different spots. You just click up here, and you can, if you want to have it over here, you can drag it over here. I tend to just use it over here in its default location, but you do you. And if you move all these things around and you want to restore the workspace the way it looked in the very beginning, so let me just pull some stuff around. Oops. Back. I believe I just close that. There we go. And I want to close that. I want to go open my tools. I closed that by mistake. So if I put this out here and I drag this out here and I collapse this, and then all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, I really would like to get back to the way it looked in the very beginning. You can reset your workspace. So you go up here in the option bar area and over on the right hand side, click this downward facing arrow, and then you can see that we're using the Essentials workspace. These are some preset workspaces set up by Photoshop, but I want to reset Essentials. And that will put everything back into the groups and the placement on your screen that Photoshop has by default. And that can really help you out if you start to get a little wonky. If you do rearrange things and you want to save your workspace, you're going to create a new workspace. And we can go over that in a later lesson. But you would choose new workspace. You would name it something like, you'll see that I have the one-on-one, which I'll just show you. That just looks a little bit different. It has some different grouping and so on and so forth. But I've named it one-on-one so that I know that if I'm working with Deke, I can choose that workspace. You can change your interface settings. So by default, the panels, the dialog boxes in the background are all dark, but you can change those under your preferences menu if you like. And that is the end of the first lesson. I hope that you've worked along with me. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. And whoops. Yep, that's it. And we'll continue on next week. Have a great day.